My name's Elliot Clemence, call signs HEMO. I'll get into that maybe later if somebody's interested. I'm here to talk to you about the F-35 program, as well as being a test pilot, flight test, flying airplanes. It's what I love. It's what I've grown up doing. And so after this presentation, we'll open up to questions, and anything you have to ask about either flying airplanes, testing, or the F-35, I'll be happy to answer. A little bit about my background. I went to the United States Naval Academy, graduated from there with a Bachelor of Science in Physics. From there, I was accepted as a pilot and was a fighter pilot for about 6 or 7 years. Applied to test pilot school for the U.S. Navy and was accepted in test pilot school, and flew F-18s, tested Hornets and Super Hornets, then left the military shortly thereafter. I worked for Boeing for a few years and then moved over to Lockheed about 4.5, 5 years ago. I've been flying the F-35 for about 4 years. Kind of my specialty is actually landing on the ship, so I do all sorts of flight tests, but kind of what I specialize is taking the C model out to the ship. We'll talk about that here briefly as well. Let's go to the next slide. So why does the F-35 look the way it does? We don't just design airplanes to look cool. I mean, it looks advanced, it looks new, it looks different than other legacy fighters. The design is actually very important, and it's designed essentially around stealth capability. So there are some very important factors when you're building a 5th-gen airplane and when you're designing an airplane for stealth. One of them is internal fuel tanks. Okay, so when you hang fuel tanks off of an airplane, a legacy airplane, that reflects radar energy. And if you're reflecting radar energy, then people can see you on radar, which means you're not stealthy. So in order to be stealthy, you have to include all of your fuel as much as possible internally. We have obviously a fixed array radar. The reason why that's important is because a mechanical scanned array radar, traditional radar that you might think of that is mechanical and moves back and forth, also reflects radar energy, and it's not very effective or efficient. Next. Engine inlets. So our inlets are specially designed for stealth, and again to hide any kind of reflection of radar energy. Next. As well as where we place the engine. The engine has to be kind of hidden back in the fuselage of the airplane. So these are all kind of design considerations that are required for stealth. All the edges are aligned just right, just properly, to very small degree of error to not reflect radar energy in a bad way. Next. And all of our antennas are actually embedded in the airplane. So if you want an airplane that is truly stealth, you have to take all these little things. They appear like little things, but they're actually very significant to make the airplane virtually invisible to enemy radar. Next. Nozzle signature, that's important for avoiding heat-seeking missiles. Next. And internal stores carriage. We're going to look a little bit at this a little bit later. Basically, we can carry all of our weapons internally. Okay, almost 5,300 pounds of weapons internally. So we don't have to hang weapons on the wing. When you do that, again, you lose your stealth capability. Okay, next. Just some more things like we talked about. Radar absorbent material, all those things are very important to the design of the airplane, and most importantly to the stealth characteristics of the airplane. Again, it has to be kind of designed in from the ground up. Next. All right, we're just going to look at some videos. The first one here in the upper left is a high angle of attack video. What that means is when we do flight test or when we build a fighter, we want to actually make sure that it flies slow very well. When you're in a fighter aircraft, a jet aircraft, flying slow is very difficult. And it's something that in the past used to be very risky. So if you fly too slow, you can stall, you can go out of control, and then you might get into a spin and not recover. So the reason why we want to fly slow is so if we need to get behind the other guy, the bad guy, we can actually slow down very quickly and do that. And it's one of the more challenging flight regimes. Everybody might think that going fast is challenging, and a fighter going slow is very challenging. Let's go ahead and play that.
High angle of attack takes us past the stall point of the airplane. Once you get past that stall angle of attack, you can still move the nose around, up and down and side to side, and maneuver to get where you want to be in relation to your opponent. So it'll be a maneuver enhancing capability that the F-35 has that perhaps gives it the advantage to any adversary it might encounter. Not only that, it gives high confidence to the pilot flying the F-35 that he can do about whatever he wants to with the airplane, take it to the edge of its envelope, and not be afraid of departing controlled flight, and not be afraid of getting control back if he does.
So as you can see, what that video was showing was some of the high angle of attack or slow speed flying we're doing, as well as part of flight test. It sounds kind of risky, and it is to a certain extent, but we actually have a way of shutting off the flight control computers, if you will, and manually putting the airplane in an out of control flight or a spin situation, then flipping a switch and making sure that the airplane could recover. One of the challenges as a test pilot is trying to figure out how to make an airplane that is designed not to go out of control, how to make it go out of control so that you can test the recovery characteristics of it. So that's one of the challenges that we had. It turns out that it's very benign. The airplane, when it recovers very quickly and immediately. And it doesn't leave you with any kind of anxiety as a pilot. So we were very happy with that line of test. We'll go to the next picture. This is depicting basically a foreship of F-35s. One of the things about the airplane that is kind of unique is we have an advanced data link system. So not only can we communicate between other F-35s very effectively, but we can also share that information with various ground sources or ground units, as well as sea units. So the information sharing capability that this airplane has kind of is a force multiplier in a sense, in that 4 airplanes actually, the sum of its parts is bigger than you would think. So that's very important to us, is being able to process the information between airplanes and then share that with other systems. It's very important for interoperability as well. Next. We've also done quite a bit. Actually, we're very far along in our flight test development, and what we are doing now primarily is weapons integration. So whether that's air-to-surface munitions or air-to-air munitions, that's basically what's occupying most of the flight test right now. We've cleared out the basic airplane, so now it's fundamentally about weapons integration. We'll go ahead and play that video.
Tiger Bullseye, 19727, 10,000.
Chester, 6-1, targeted. Chester, 6-1, stand by. 5, 4, 3. Box, box! Box, box! Weapon away! Copy, weapon away.
And so you can see this is the advantage of internal weapons carriage, is we can carry those missiles and air-to-surface munitions inside the airplane. And here we're just doing a live fire test of an AIM-120, which is a medium to long-range air-to-air missile. So we've finished all of the internal weapons carriage test work. What we're working on now is external carriage. So, if there's a lower threat out there and we don't need to be in a stealth configuration, we can adapt and actually hang weapons on the wings externally as well. So we're testing that. One of the advantages of the airplane, or one of the really neat things, one of the primary great things about the airplane is the sensor suite. So we have various sensors in the airplane, both electro-optical, infrared, and RF, radio frequency kind of radar, electronic warfare type sensors. What we have in the next video is basically a video of the electro-optical targeting system. This is a targeting system that we use for reconnaissance and guiding weapons and things like that. And the detail is pretty eye-watering. We'll go ahead and play. If you look at the airplane, it's actually mounted in the nose. It's that little kind of chin pod that you might see. And this is video from that. You can see people walking around. You can see somebody sweeping. This is our primary targeting, electro-optical targeting sensor system. Another kind of unique thing that we have is something called DAS, Distributed Aperture System. And so what that is, it's another infrared system that we have on the airplane, and it consists of 6 flush-mounted cameras, IR cameras, that are basically embedded in the airplane. And what that does is it senses any kind of missile shot or any kind of heat signature that might be out there. A side benefit is that it gives the pilot some really cool video. So it allows basically the airplane to see the entire world 360 degrees in a spherical view in the IR spectrum. Not only that, but it actually pumps that video into the helmet, and we'll talk about that shortly. But it allows you to actually look through the cockpit and see through the cockpit. You can pretty much look through anything with this distributed aperture system in combination with the helmet. And it's pretty impressive, the acuity and what you can see with it. And it literally turns the night into day. So if you're flying around at night, it's essentially just a switch on the stick that allows you to get that video into your visor in the helmet. And so it's not as, it doesn't focus in quite as deeply as we use the electro-optical targeting system, the T-FLIR, for very precise kind of soda straw imagery. We use the DAS for kind of general situational awareness as far as threats or any kind of missile warning out there. We'll talk about the helmet real quick. So the helmet is a system that's integrated in the airplane, okay? And what it does is it not only provides off-foresight cueing, which means cueing in all directions through symbology, but what's very unique about it is that you can actually display video in the visor. So any kind of video that we need from DAS or the night vision camera, that can be displayed in the visor, and again, it can turn that night into day. And we can pretty much look wherever we have to look unobstructed. Each helmet is custom fitted to the pilot, so you actually go down and get a laser scan of your skull, and they make the pads and they actually custom fit every helmet for a particular pilot. So it's very comfortable because of that. Next. Like I said, my specialty is operating off the ship. We have 3 models, 3 variants of the F-35, the A model, the B model, and the C model. The B model and the C model both go to the ship. The B model does vertical landings on what we call an LHD class carrier. The C model takes arrested landings on the bigger nuclear aircraft carriers. So we'll play the next video, which is some B model footage. B model, primarily the Marine variant, specializes in coming in for vertical landings. It's kind of like a transformer in ways, all kinds of doors open up and the lift fan starts spinning, and it's a jet that actually hovers, much like the Harrier, except it does so with much less workload required from the pilot. I can actually come from about 250 knots, which is, I don't know how many kilometers per hour, 250 knots or so, to a hover just using the switches on the throttle and stick. It's very low workload. It's very easy to come into a hover and very unique in that regard. Let's play the next one. So this is night testing in the B model. So very unique environments, 3 variants that have been built to do very different missions, but they're very common in a lot of regards. Let's go ahead and just play the last video here.
We didn't leave anything on the table. We accomplished everything we set out to do. We performed. It's a lot like what we've come to expect as our standard.
Good morning to everyone on the flight deck. Aircrew now manning for Event 1, Case 1 launch, Case 1 recovery. Temperature 76 degrees, altimeter 2966, density altitude 1787. Personnel not involved with flight ops must now leave the flight deck and catwalks. Stand well clear of all rotors, prop arcs, jet intakes, and exhaust. Start to go aircraft. Start them up!
The spectrum of tests that we've done out here is pretty wide-ranging. You know, the sexy stuff that we get, the aircraft flying around, we did a lot of catapults, did a lot of recovery, approach work, mission flying, looking at JPALs, ICLS work at the back of the boat, did some stuff at night. But that encompasses only a little bit of what we've done out here. There's a lot of additional work that logistics test and evaluation has done that you can really only do out here at the ship. We've done a lot on the hangar deck with the engine, done a lot with the aircraft, done a lot with the flying program, and it's really been multifaceted.
The big thing was the minimum end airspeed test. We did that at both mill and max power at 60,000 pounds and 55,000 pounds gross weight. So we went out and we found the no kidding minimum airspeed that you can launch the jet off at those weights in mill and max power.
We did a lot of cleanup, stuff that we weren't able to finish, so we opened up the crosswind envelope, so now you have a bigger range of winds at which you can launch the airplane.
This time we got out to 15 knots both on the bow and on the waist catapults, and had good results for the aircraft launching and flying away in all the crosswinds that we looked at.
I did have the opportunity to do the Gen 2 night test last time around, and this time I flew the Gen 3 helmet. So a lot of our props that we saw in the Gen 2 helmet, we didn't really see as much in the Gen 3.
JPAL is a Joint Precision Aircraft Landing System, and it's basically just a tool, an instrument tool that we're going to use to do precision landings at the ship. The next version of the software will have the full precision landing capability. That's what we'll test at DT3. However, the Catbird does have that software in it already. So we actually have the Catbird out here flying approaches to the ship. So you have a 737 aircraft flying approaches coming down on final to the carrier and then waving it off, obviously prior to touchdown.
It's neat to watch the aircraft do what they do. You know, it's watching the end speed and the aircraft sink off the bow was always going to be a memorable thing. But what is more memorable than that is watching the team make it happen, watching the team work together. And that to me is the special nature of all of this work, is the teaming, the people, and watching them overcome and adapt.
Does the F-35 match this F-16 in maneuverability and G performance?
Yeah, so I've flown, my background is I've flown the Legacy Hornet quite a bit and the Super Hornet a fair amount, probably over 2,000 hours in the Legacy Hornet, about 600 hours in the Super Hornet. And I've flown the F-16 a few times. In my experience, the F-35 is very comparable to those airplanes. We're still in the development phase, but we're very close to the end, and there's some tweaks we can do with flight control software to make the airplane a little bit more maneuverable. And when I say maneuverable, G onset rate, angle of attack, onset rate, there are things that we can tweak to make it more maneuverable. But overall, it's very comparable to fourth generation airplanes I've flown.
Could you say a little about how does a normal workday look for a test pilot? How much do you fly and how much time do you spend preparing? I can say
there is no normal workday for me. You know, sometimes I'm in Denmark in front of people talking about the airplane. Sometimes I'm at my desk doing very boring report writing. And sometimes when on the better days, I'm actually flying the airplane. So as a test pilot, we're involved in a lot of the test planning. You might think that because I'm a test pilot that I love being risky and that being a test pilot is inherently risky, so you must enjoy risk. Bungee jumping on the weekends, skydiving, no, not so much. From my perspective, my job is about avoiding risk or minimizing risk as much as possible to safely conduct test flights. When we're test flying, obviously we're exploring new boundaries in the envelope of the airplane. So we do that with great caution. We do it very carefully.
And could you describe when you were out on the carrier and doing the tests out there? How was a normal working day out there?
It was like being back in the Navy. So I spent 14 years in the Navy and then got out, and then going back to the ship for the first time in a brand new airplane is once in a lifetime kind of opportunity. It's kind of like going to the moon for a test pilot. It's something that you're only going to do once. It's that kind of opportunity in a new airplane for the first time is never going to come up again in your career. So it was the highlight of my career, going, taking a new airplane like the F-35 to the ship for the first time and landing it on the boat was one of the most remarkable things I did. And I remember the emotion kind of, there's a lot of stress and there's a lot of anxiety building up to that event. But when you do it, it was so easy. I just remember that feeling of relief. Wow, that was no big deal. That was easy. Obviously, when you do something for the first time like that, there are admirals watching you, there's vice presidents, there's all kinds of folks out there watching what you're doing and how it's going. So there is a lot of stress in it. But actually being in the cockpit and landing on the boat was quite a thrill.
I don't know if you can answer this, maybe it's too strategic, but could you comment on how the stealth capabilities of the plane are projected to hold up against developments in radar technology and so forth?
Yeah, I can certainly touch on that. You probably read or written articles about stealth and that it's not the end-all be-all. It doesn't make you invisible to everything, and that's certainly true. But what it does do is break a link in that chain. So if you're being targeted by a threat, stealth is very important in combination with electronic attack, electronic warfare, and information sharing. So the pilot who knows everything about the battle space and can share that information with other airplanes, has the greatest situational awareness, will be the most survivable. Stealth is a key part of that survivability. And the stealth will be relevant in 10 years, or 15 years too, or 20? Yes, it will. We have future capabilities coming up. And again, when I referenced electronic attack, that's something that's unique to this airplane, its ability to do that as a fighter, in a fighter configured variant, to actually be able to employ very powerful electronic attack. And so when I say electronic attack, what I mean is jamming, kind of blinding the enemy's radar. So if you're jamming the enemy, if you're in a stealth airplane, you get closer to the enemy. If you can jam them and be stealthy, you can get even closer. And so that gives you a huge advantage.
Could you perhaps say a little more about the communication between the planes and communications with other troops out in the battlefield?
Yes, like I said, it has an advanced data link for information sharing not only between each aircraft, but it can network amongst various battle stations, both on the ground and at sea, and other airborne assets. So again, it's just what that provides is not only situational awareness to the pilot, but also situational awareness to the ships and to the Air Force bases around it. And that is maybe not talked about enough as far as how important the airplane is. We've been told by folks in military circles that that is one of the key components. It's not just its ability to be effective as a fighter airplane, but as an information sharer. That's a key capability that people are looking for.
Is that one of the things that make it something special compared to the legacy, the fourth generation?
Yes, it does have unique capabilities. The MADL system, again, the Advanced Data Link, what's key about that is how fast it can share information and how much information it can share. So that's something that is unique, a unique capability to this airplane. That fourth generation airplanes have something called Link 16, which is a kind of slower network. Think of like your old dial-up modem. Okay, that's what the old airplanes now. With the new MADL system that we have, it's more like 4G and above type service. So that's how I'd compare it.
Yeah.
I know it's early days, but given the fact that many NATO air forces in Europe are flying the Typhoon, and that the F-35 will have at some point in time to operate together with the Typhoon, do you have any personal impression of where the two aircraft overlap or where they complement each other?
I do not have personal experience with Typhoon, and I can't really talk to that specifically just because I don't have the information. I don't know. But again, the airplane has fourth gen data networks, that Link 16 that I talked about, so it can share information with fourth gen airplanes. But I'm not familiar or familiar in a detailed way with Typhoon capability.
I think you said that you also flew the Hornet.
Yes.
How do you compare this one to the Hornet?
It's a generational leap. So it's almost not comparable in a sense because the capabilities are so much more advanced than the Hornet or the Super Hornet. I flew the Super Hornet for about 4 or 5 years, so I'm pretty familiar with those capabilities. And when you step into this airplane, it's like stepping into a fighter from the future. Everything from the large display, the touch screen, it has voice recognition. You can actually talk to the airplane and have it do functions for you, to having total situational awareness of everything around you without having to necessarily manipulate or operate the sensors. Something called data fusion is very unique to this airplane, where it takes all that sensor information. And this is something that's very hard to do. It takes all the sensor information from our radio frequency, the radar, the electronic warfare, our infrared sensors, and actually fuses that to the pilot in a common picture, so he doesn't have to operate all those different sensors and try to figure it out in his mind. So again, that leads to survivability, because if you know the battle space, then you can survive better.
I know that you from time to time work with a Danish test pilot that's in the States. Could you elaborate a bit about what he actually does, what we get from him being in part of the program?
Yeah, actually there are 2 Danish pilots in the United States. One is with the Joint Program Office in Washington, D.C., and one is stationed out at Edwards Air Force Base, which is the flight test center for the F-35A model in Southern California. So the Danish test pilot that is at Edwards Air Force Base, he flies a Danish F-16 in support of F-35 test flight development. And so when we fly test flights, we don't typically go alone. We have somebody with us. And Pella is one of those pilots. He's pretty involved with in the development of the program with basically all the data gathering throughout development, and he flies pretty regularly out there. I've flown with him a few times. He's a great guy.
And then we have a question in the back.
Right, maybe related a bit to the data link systems. Can you talk about the possible cooperation between F-35 and drones in the future, how that will work, and if there's a major difference between that and fourth generation planes?
I don't have specific, I know there are people working on that. I don't have any specific information for you about how it's going to network with drones specifically. I know that's in the works. That is more of a Block 4 capability. So we have the initial capability of the airplane goes all the way through Block 3. That's something that's going to be probably integrated in the future at some point. I'm sorry, I don't have details on exactly when or what that capability will be.
Yeah, I was told that F-35 is a system in a system. Does that mean that the F-35 can do missions alone if we are thinking about air supremacy or so? Can it fly both offensive and defensive at the same time? And does it have the capability for both? I think about weapon loads and keep the stealthy that it's supposed to be?
It has the best capability to fly alone. I think the system of systems comment might be that it's not just about a single F-35 out in the battle space. It's regarding that information sharing, that it can cooperate with others and share information with a lot of different assets out there. If this airplane was alone, it would be the most single capable airplane out there because of the stealth, because of the sensor suite it has in the internal weapons carriage. Absolutely. Sir.
Maybe I could help you a little bit out because there were some questions about the cooperation between Typhoons and the F-35 and also with other aircraft. Actually, there's a ROSI report made by the Brits to look into this. And I think the conclusion is that there's a synergy effect between the two when they work together. Yes. The F-35 being the combat manager, so to speak, getting in front and taking all the risks, but it has a smaller weapons load when it works in the stealthy mode. Therefore, the Typhoons could help out with having lots of weaponry to be directed with the F-35.
Thank you for that. That's actually a good point. So if we talk in general, not maybe specifically about Typhoon, but fourth generation airplanes in general, those fourth generation airplanes are kind of viewed as support airplanes for what the F-35 can do. So yes, they'll absolutely be integrated. The data links and the information sharing back to fourth gen is critical. And so they will be interoperable to all fourth generations to some degree. And we actually look at tactics and ways to make sure that we don't leave fourth gen behind, so to speak, that we include them, because you're right, if you want the bomb trucks, if you want high weapons carriage externally, but you want to preserve the stealth characteristics of the F-35 so it can go in deeper into enemy territory, then that's certainly a consideration.
Question over here.
Yes.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about pilot training and pilot development. During your presentation, of course, you said the F-35 is a very easy aircraft to fly compared to fourth generation aircraft. What does that mean for pilot training and in particular fleet management? How many hours do you actually need in an actual aircraft versus other means of keeping your currency?
Great question. We have pretty high fidelity simulators. When I say high fidelity, I don't just mean, kind of like the TV screen and what you see visually, but I mean high fidelity in that the flight controls in the simulator behave very similar to how the actual airplane flies. So the pilot training can focus not on how to land the airplane, how to take off, how to fly the airplane, because that's all very easy and can be taught in the simulator. And as you can see, one of the unique things about the airplane, the F-35, much like the F-22, is there's only one seat. Okay, there are no two-seat models. There's one seat. So when a pilot takes his first flight, he's all by himself. That's pretty unique. But fortunately, the airplane's so easy to fly, and the simulators are so good, and they replicate the airplane so well that when I had my first flight, it was just one of those things that, oh, it's just like the simulator. As far as pilot training goes, typical kind of peanut butter spread of academics and simulator training, and then for test pilots, a little bit different. The operational pilots kind of go through more flights before they get fully qualified in the airplane. But again, we're very comfortable now putting somebody who's never flown this airplane, has just flown the simulator, into a single-seat airplane like this off for the first time because of that ease of flying.
You're a former Navy pilot and you've flown Super Hornet with 2 engines. What do you think about landing on an aircraft carrier with an airplane with only 1 engine?
You know, I've actually done it several times, and I haven't really thought about it. So I guess that's good. I was involved with, so early on in the development program, 2012-ish, I was one of the air start pilots. So what that means is you purposefully shut down the engine, glide for a while, and then start it back up. Well, my background, my training had been in two engine airplanes for quite a while, so it was kind of emotional to be in a single engine airplane and do this kind of flight test work. But it went very well. The airplane had no engine issues with the air start testing, and it really kind of increased my confidence, not only in the engine, but flying a single engine airplane. And I'd developed a few hundred hours in the airplane before I went to the ship. And so it was one of those things that as a Navy pilot, having 2 engines is kind of a very emotional thing. It's something that you kind of cling on to. But when you actually go out there to the ship in a single engine airplane, it's not a big deal. It's something we became very comfortable with very quickly.
Is there any experience with the F-35 in an Arctic environment?
There are plans for that. We have plans to put a parachute on the back of the A model so that it can land in icy conditions. The U.S. Air Force is planning on basing the airplanes up in Alaska. We've done lots of, a fair amount of environmental testing on the airplane, so bringing it all the way down to, I think we got down to minus 30 Fahrenheit-ish, so pretty cold conditions, and operating the airplane in that manner. And we didn't really find any showstoppers there. So I'm not deeply familiar with Arctic operations, but I can tell you from the flight tests that we've done, and after seeing it in an austere environment like the carrier and how it behaves and how easy it is to maintain, we don't see any issues right now with that.
Please, what about the operating and support cost of the F-35 in comparison with the Super Hornet, the F-16 and the Typhoon? Because that's very important for the budget of the Danish Air Force.
I'm sorry, I missed the first part of that question, the support?
The operating and support cost per flight hour.
Oh, I'm not an expert on that. I don't know the different costs. I'm a pilot. I try not to get too involved with the programmatics of it, or the cost stuff. But the airplane is fairly efficient as far as maintainability. We've seen that in environments like the shipboard environment, it's very maintainable. But I don't have the cost numbers on the top of my head.
I have 2 questions. How do you get your call sign?
Okay.
And second question, how do you evaluate the dogfighting capacity compared to the F-16 or F-15? Are we equal or superior?
I'll answer the second question first. In my opinion, having flown all those 3 airplanes, they're very comparable as far as dogfighting. Each airplane kind of has its little niche strength in some regard, but it comes to the pilot in the box, so to speak. So they're so comparable. Nothing really stands out about each of those airplanes. It's really the capability of the fighter pilot. to a large degree in some of those dogfighting situations. How I got my call sign, kind of an embarrassing story, but I'll tell it anyway. So I was stationed on the ship for the first time as a 24-year-old just out of flight school, and I went to the ship, and they kind of played a little trick on me. They put me on a bed or rack that was underneath a blowing vent. And so I slept on this rack underneath a blowing vent for about 3 or 4 days, and it dried out all my sinuses. So I basically really sore throat, dried out sinuses. Got scheduled for my first flight with my new squadron the next day. And as soon as I put on the oxygen mask, I had a little trickle of blood that came out. Okay, so here I am, a new pilot on a very tribal kind of environment on a ship. Lots of people watching me. Who's this new pilot out here? And I had to shut down the airplane because I had a nosebleed. I didn't know what to do. I got out of the airplane. By the time I got down to the ready room, okay, where all the pilots hang out, there were 26 call signs on the board, 26. And I can assure you that hemo was the nicest one, kind of hemoglobin, hematoma. So,
could you perhaps say something about the close air support and the F-35?
Yeah, absolutely. So the airplane, it's a multi-role fighter. It's designed to accomplish a lot of various missions. One of those missions is close air support, so supporting troops on the ground, troops in contact. So one of the kind of unique things about what this airplane can do is we normally think of close air support nowadays as Afghanistan or Iraq, what we would consider as pilots as low threat close air support. The reason why we consider that low threat in Afghanistan is because there's no real surface to air missile type capability. There's no integrated air defense that we have to worry about. So we can at will orbit over troops in contact and support them as required. Well, for high threat close air support, that's a different story. When you do have surface-to-air missiles out there that can reach out and touch you, which will happen in a future conflict, this airplane is very good at dealing with that threat. So from a high threat close air support perspective, this airplane is very good at that.
Hi, you have talked a bit about all the good things about this plane. Do you see any downsides of it compared to some of the other planes you have flown?
Not really. I mean, it's been such like I said, a generational leap in capability, and they put a lot of thought into the design of this airplane so that it can do all those mission areas, all those mission sets, like I said, close air support, air-to-air, surveillance, reconnaissance. It can do all those missions very well. And there is definitely a big difference in capability when you climb into one of these airplanes over the 4th gen or the legacy fighters.
Today, the combat situation, especially in Afghanistan, for instance, is very specific and very, it's very hot. Isn't it, what is your experience with 2 pilots in a plane? I mean, a flying pilot and system operator. Doesn't it help the pilot with a man who takes the technical part of the side, and you can use all your time to fly the plane?
I don't think so. I've grown up as a single pilot in single pilot cockpits. So most of the flying I've done has been just single seat airplanes. If you can reduce the workload through fusion, through sensors that operate very well, sensors that operate automatically, then you have to do less work as a pilot. So if you don't have to worry about flying the airplane as much because it flies so nicely, and if you don't have to worry about operating the systems, then really you don't need another guy. The airplane was designed to be able to accommodate one pilot and the workload required for one pilot. So that's inherent in the design. Sometimes flying with another person can be kind of awkward, in my opinion. It's kind of like if you had to steer the car and somebody else had to do the gas and brake, it would be kind of annoying. It's a very good analogy to operating an airplane in a combat environment.
Og så har vi Anker herovre.
I would like to go back to the good old F-16. I know there are more than me here who have some hours on that beauty, and I will start to say it's a success. Now it's 35 years old, and I'm convinced if there was an F-16, a new F-16 in the competition, there wouldn't be no competition. Can you tell me if you continue to operate as we do today? Denmark have never been the first in and first out, but if you continue in Command operations or whatever, is the F-35 to select and be better if we could continue with new F-16 with an AESA radar?
Well, that might be something that would be desirable for today, but the threat is advancing. So there's going to be a capability gap at some point, and it's going to be eventually pretty significant if you stick with legacy airplanes. To keep up with that capability gap, or to keep that capability gap in your favor, this airplane is probably the most suitable for that. So eventually you have to take that jump to the next generation. It's not a question of if, it's just when do you take that jump. And most people, think the sooner the better to stay ahead of that threat.
A lot of F-35 pilots talk about this helmet and the helmet and the helmet and the helmet. Perhaps you could talk a little more about this helmet. Why is it so special?
Well, it's special in that it requires very new technology. And it allows us to do things that we've just never been able to do before. So we've talked about the ability to take that sensor video and display it in the helmet and how that adds to pilot awareness. One of the other things it does is allows for off-bore sight targeting. So although the airplane is very comparable in the dogfighting arena with other airplanes, it has off-bore sight capability that allows you just to look over at another airplane and take a lock or target it, and then shoot a missile if desired. So it accomplishes various functions with within the airplane, and kind of most importantly is it's how the pilot sees the battle space in the visual arena. So we have all the sensor information when the pilot wants to look out or wants to look down, see what's underneath them. He uses the helmet. Not something that just protects your head, but something that actually gives the pilot better awareness. There was one flight that I had that it really kind of struck me. I was doing a test flight, but it was at kind of an elevated angle attack and kind of a slow speed flight performance test point where I had to maintain this very precise condition, a very slow speed for about 3 minutes. And it was a very important test point. And I got a call from air traffic control that there were 2 airplanes approaching me and potentially flying underneath me. And so kind of the aha moment was when I could just flip a switch and I could actually see through my own airplane without coming off that condition, just see through my own airplane and see those 2 airplanes fly right under me and right in front of me. It was kind of the aha moment of why the helmet was so important and why that video display is so important to the pilot.
Yeah. Yes, about the helmet as such. Is it mature now? I understand there has been some problems with unstable videos and things like that.
Yeah, so it's like any new technology, there are going to be little bumps in the road. So we have just started what we call Gen 3 helmet testing. So there is a Gen 1 that was a long time ago. Then the Gen 2 has basically sustained us up till now, and now they're doing Gen 3 testing on the helmet. And what that does is it provides a little bit better acuity. It gives us a better night vision camera. And so instead of having to put on clunky MVGs, we actually have a little camera embedded in the top of the helmet, and that displays video into our visor. And it has some other things that improve the stability in the video and in the picture in the helmet. And so far that testing's gone very well. I've only flown with it once at night, but the picture was much clearer, and you can tell that they put a lot of work into it.
Yeah, hello again. If I may ask a more personal question.
Sure.
Back in flight school, were you nervous about something? What were you most nervous about? And the second question, do you have any special rituals before you go flying?
Well, those are personal questions, but I'll answer them. Yeah, so when you're a pilot, what you're most scared of is screwing something up. And so my little personal ritual is before I get aboard the ladder, before I climb up the ladder to any airplane, I say a short prayer, please don't let me screw this up. And it's just a personal ritual, and if I forget to do it, I get anxious. So that's the pilot's greatest fear. If you've watched interviews with astronauts, they have the same fear. They think I'd rather be injured or maimed or killed than screw something up and be known for it. So if you do screw something up, you usually get a call sign out of it as well. So.
Hello. Just a second. What will you say in bigger conflict with other country with stealth fighter? Where will the F-35 stand against? I know Russia and China is working on advanced next gen stealth fighters.
Yeah, they certainly are, and so. Again, that causes great anxiety, that the fact that they're advancing so quickly and they're coming up with their version of 5th gen airplanes. We're staying ahead of them. This airplane is very capable. We have a lot of talented engineers that have designed it and that are working on it to make it better. So as that threat evolves, this airplane has a lot of room to evolve faster. And so from that perspective, it's very important.
How much fuel does it burn off in a full throttle, about a minute?
Quite a bit. So fuel flows, that's a hard... so I could tell you we burn about 100-ish, 150 pounds of fuel, per minute, just in a kind of a cruising mode. When we go into full afterburner, we burn, just like any other jet fighter, quite a bit more. And that's how you make all the thrust. So thrust is just mass and velocity, right? So the mass comes from the fuel in the air. So we burn much more fuel in full afterburner than we do kind of just cruising around.
Regarding to fuel consumption, I have a question about supercruise. As far as I'm told, it's not supercruise capable. Is it not as important anymore because the latest generations prior to the F-35, it was a great talking point at they were supercruise capable. Can you tell us something about if it will be supercruise capable in the future?
The current plans are it's not going to be supercruise. Now, what supercruise is referring to is the ability to sustain above Mach 1, perhaps Mach 1.5, without being in full afterburner or being an afterburner in general. Really, it's just a question of supercruise sounds, pretty advanced and pretty nifty, but in order to supercruise, you have to burn pretty much just about as much fuel to stay at that Mach than using the afterburner. It doesn't have that much utility for what we do. We are more or just as interested in the ability to carry a lot of fuel and be airborne for a long period of time, in a sustained period of time, as we do in being able to be above Mach 1 for a sustained period of time. So the airplane does not supercruise, but it does go Mach 1.6, 700 knots, as designed.
One of the things which has been mentioned in Danish press is the requirements for daily maintenance. And I would like to ask you, the requirements for the mechanics, obviously you need to be able to use a screwdriver. But do you also need to be, for instance, a software engineer in order to maintain your aircraft? And a short second question. We've heard a lot about missions in, for instance, Afghanistan and Iraq. Sorry. So I would like to ask a very undiplomatic question. Sure. Does this thing knock out SU-27 in any terms?
Yeah, I mean, I can answer. The maintenance question is a very good one. As the airplane evolves, the kind of the maintenance hours required per flight hour come down. I can tell you stealth airplanes are generally known to be difficult to maintain because of the stealth coatings. This airplane is not. It's stealth, but it's not hard to maintain from that stealth coating perspective. It's very easy. And actually the F-22 is taking some of those technologies that we've developed with F-35 and applying those to its stealth maintenance. We've obviously also taken it to sea. Operating on a ship with not as much space and not as many tools is challenging, but we've done that successfully as well. As far as the threat goes, Su-27 and beyond, this airplane, I don't have a doubt, because of its ability to jam and its ability with stealth, will be superior to those threat aircraft out there.
Nu skal I bare spørge løs. Det er jo ikke hver dag, man har en testpilot i landet. I hvert fald ikke amerikansk. Er der flere spørgsmål? Ja.
Have you tried to pitch two of them against each other?
We're dying to. They just won't let us quite yet. But yeah, we have flown. We've flown most of our flying together as cooperative. In other words, we're not fighting each other. But at some point here soon, I'm sure two pilots will get out there together and see what they can do.
Also, other air types like I don't know, the B-2 bomber or something like that.
I'm sorry.
Other types. This is the F-35.
Yes.
Then perhaps against the F-22.
We do interoperability missions, and we look at interoperability with F-22, but we haven't gone head to head with F-22. We're obviously, that's considered a friendly airplane, so we're.
Okay. I have one last question. I saw when the Bravo version was landing, that there was a hatch just behind the cockpit.
Yep.
Have you tried to close some of them down, like deliberately, to see if you could perform a landing without it?
Well, we could not perform a vertical landing if that thing shut, because what it does is that's what we call the upper lift fan door, and so that door comes open so that air can come down into the lift fan assembly. And so if air can't get into the lift fan, then you can't produce thrust with the lift fan, so you won't be able to vertically land. But we have done testing with doors open and closed, kind of in what we call the mode 1 or normal flying envelope. We haven't really seen issues with flying qualities with the doors open and shut in that configuration. But it's kind of a transformer. It's a marvel. The B model is pretty neat from a pilot's perspective because there's so many moving parts and so many things that it can do like that mechanically.
What is the expected lifespan?
I believe as far as how long the airplane is going to be relevant, we're looking at 50 years. Is how long we plan to keep this airplane relevant, 50 years and beyond.
About the lifespan, Mr. Bogdan, head of the Joint Strike Fighter Program Office, last month in the Senate Commission in the US, he told them that due to the long development time, the software system is in fact obsolete in the board computers, and that they need to be upgraded, and also the optical system, that it cannot be compared with the current sniper port technology and has to be replaced, and that will be in 2024. What about that?
Well, I'm certainly not going to disagree with General Bogdan, but I did talk to him a couple weeks ago, and I didn't hear those complaints from him. So everything, or most of the things that I've heard from him, from the pilot's perspective, have been positive in nature. As far as the electro-optical targeting system, there is a plan to upgrade it to make it even better than it is, but I haven't heard those complaints or those issues.
Ja. Derovre.
Yeah, hi. Another personal question. How are pilots regarded in America? I know that in Denmark, fighter pilots are seen as highly skilled military men, personnel, of course. How are you regarded in America? Are you like in Top Gun, seen as these angelic men? Or
We're somewhere between monkeys and Top Gun. That's kind of how we're regarded. And I can tell you, my wife doesn't see me as the Top Gun scarf wearing type of person. But yeah, there is obviously a lot of envy for pilots because they think what we do is glamorous and wow, that must be so cool. What a great job you have. I can tell you it's what I've grown up with. It's what I've done for the past 20 or so years. And so sometimes you lose sight of that because you're involved in kind of daily grind of either doing flight test work or some other kind of work. There is a lot of actual work that you have to do, studying and memorizing and things like that to become a pilot. And to be a pilot, you have to stay on top of that stuff. So it's not as glamorous as it looks, I can tell you that. But it is very enjoyable and it's very rewarding.
I don't know if you know, but a few weeks ago, a Danish pilot had to eject from his aircraft due to technical problems with his F-16. Is the whole ejection thing part of the test program as well? And will you do it with a crash test dummy, or will you be lucky enough to try it yourself?
I'm not going to try that one. No, I didn't sign up for that test. No, we actually have, part of the ejection seat certification testing, we don't use an actual pilot to test it out. We used dummies in a sled system that's very sophisticated, much like you would a crash test dummy with a vehicle. So we have specially designed what we call sleds that are rocket powered that have the identical shape of the forward fuselage in the cockpit and the identical canopy in cockpits with a dummy in there that has very precise instrumentation throughout. And so we can measure all the kind of loads on the dummy or the person when they do that sled ejection seat testing. I do not. No, I don't plan to find out.
Also on injection seats, it's particularly for the B model. I know the Russian Fordia that was also using lift engines to stay stable during the landing mode. If the lift engine got broken during landing, there was not time enough for the pilot to eject, so it was automatically rejected without any pilot intervention. Do you have anything like that in the B model?
Oh, we absolutely do. Yeah. At first I thought you were describing the B model because that is a key component of the B model, and you're right, it's very specific to the B model. So when you come into a vertical landing mode in the B variant, if something were to go catastrophically wrong, like the lift fan were just to stop or you were to have an engine failure, you might not be able to get to the ejection handle in time because you're so low, and that kind of failure might pitch you over very quickly. So they've installed a safety feature that is an automatic ejection system, which when you first hear about it from the pilot's perspective sounds a little risky. I don't know if I want to trust computers that much, but it's proved to be very safe and very capable. So if the airplane does experience, there are a lot of conditions that have to be met, but if the aircraft does experience an uncontrollable pitch over low to the ground like that, it'll get you out automatically.
Don't you get a warning before you're being shot out?
No, I think you'll just be wondering why you're in a parachute.
Okay.
That's your warning.
Og så har vi Anker.
We have touched it before. Once again, 10 or a little more years ago, Lockheed Martin said that the Joint Strike Fighter was designed as a fighter-bomber aircraft. And they also said why. They said if it wasn't, then some congressman could go ahead and figure out good reasons why not to continue with the F-22. My question is it still a fighter-bomber aircraft, or have there been some kind of development so you will call it an air defense fighter as well?
It's a multi-role fighter, so it is inherently designed to do all those roles. It's not just a bomber, it's not just a fighter, it's not just a reconnaissance platform, it's not just a data information sharing platform, it's all of those. And so it's been designed from the ground up to be able to do all those missions. It can do air interdiction. It can do those air-to-air missions very well, but it can also do air-to-surface missile or air-to-surface missions with its capabilities, with its targeting systems, electro-optical, electronic warning systems, and those types of things. The ability to jam and go into places, into what we call access-denied environments. So those areas in threat nations that have such a robust surface-to-air capability that we would normally, with legacy fighters, consider them not accessible. We can't go there. We'll be shot down. This airplane specializes in being able to go there, but it also does the air interdiction role just as well.
Himo, you may or may not be aware that among the people who are going to decide, or among the type of aircraft that Denmark is going to buy, a particular issue arose earlier this year, which was that there are, although you said earlier, there are 2 Danes who are involved in the program, there are no Danes who are going to sit in the actual cockpit and fly the aircraft prior to a decision being made on which type of aircraft is going to be purchased. Therefore, Denmark will have to rely upon the reports of people like you. Why should they?
Well, I guess one reason, or one thought is that Denmark bought the F-16 without test flying it first. So there is some history to that. But more importantly, we have those embedded pilots. They have access to a lot of the information, a lot of the data that's coming from the development test side of the program. And they're embedded very deeply with the program, so they have access to all that information. Simply flying the airplane won't really add to what they already know. It would be fun for them, I suppose, to go fly the airplane, but it's not something that's necessarily required. If they did, they would probably just say it flies like the simulator. So there might be emphasis, some emotional emphasis placed on that, but from a data gathering perspective, it's not going to add up. That wouldn't add too much value, in my opinion, having flown the airplane.
One final question, yeah?
Do you know if any of the Danish pilots have flown the simulator?
Oh, yes, I do know for a fact. Yeah, Pell, who is a Danish pilot in Edwards, has flown the simulator quite a bit, and we allow visitors to fly the simulator quite regularly. So not many surprises there. The airplane flies so close to the simulator that they're not going to find any differences.
And one final question up here.
Yes. How big is the capacity of bomb load and missile loads inside the bomb well?
About 5,300 pounds of internal capability. To give you guys some kind of reference, the only other platform out there, fighter platform that has internal weapons carriage is the F-22, and that's a little over 3,000 pounds of internal carriage. So the F-35 is pretty capable as far as internal weapons bay carriage. What that would equate to is 2 2,000-pound bombs and 2 air-to-air missiles is kind of the internal standard loadout.
Okay, is it possible to put inside a kind of a bomb rack inside so you can have more bombs than only one?
The bomb capacity is pretty much defined as it is, so we can put 2 2,000-pound bombs in the airplane. We may be looking at being able to carry more missiles if required. So there are folks looking at that.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
As I understand it, you also have the ability to put weapons on like normal. Then you will not be stealthy if you have wing.
Yes, and that's actually what is occupying. We've done almost, if not all, of the internal weapons testing. So what's occupying most of our flight tests now is external weapons carriage in the non-stealth configuration. So we can put basically 3 pylons on each wing, so 6 pylons total, and we can carry weapons on those pylons externally.
Okay. Yes, I think we should wrap it up here and say a very warm thank you to Elliot for coming here tonight, and to all you coming here tonight. And so thank you very much, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.